Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. If you want to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 69 of Breaking Step. Quigley! Jekyll announced on entering the inn and silencing it. Tibbs had confirmed the warrior was there beforehand. You are going to be amazed by the fourth floor. The chair scraped loudly as Quigley stood and said in disbelief, You didn't. No, you're making this up. Whoops. What happened here? Come back here. There we go. You're making this up. Me? Jekyll said, sounding hurt. Make up something like that? I would never. You would, Mez replied. Mez replied without the usual amusement. But this time he isn't. He trailed off. Impressive, Commodore said. Does not do the sight justice. He headed for the table. Tibbs hurried after him, wanting to be out of the knight's sight. The pride in their eyes as they raised their tankard to him was disconcerting. So pay up, Jekyll said. If I remember correctly, it was 1 gold coin, wasn't it? Quigley snorted. Not without proof. Tell me what's there. Can't talk about the floor outside the dungeon. You know that. You'll get your proof on your next run, Dunn said. The guard will let you know the fourth floor has been breached. You can resolve your bet then. Jekyll was the last to sit down, still straight from the struggle, from strutting to their table. Quigley's glare at the fighter was dark the entire time, but finally he sat and huddled in quiet conversation with his team. Tibbs was considering what he'd need to do with air to... okay, that's... that... Oh no, to hear them. Without also bringing all the other voices within the inn to him, and when Khrushchev placed tankards, plural, on the table. Did you really clear the boss room? Oh yeah, Jekyll said, beaming. Dawn worked out the last of the puzzles to make it easier. Then it was just about pounding the creature into rubble. Khrushchev kissed the top of Jekyll's head. I knew you'd manage it. When he returned with their meal, he pulled a chair and they sat and they quietly recounted the run. When they were done and Khrushchev was called back to work, Tibbs told the others what Stowe and Genny told them. I want to change at the time they were done. Khrushchev was called back. The main reason is that I don't want to make it sound like Tibbs actually waited until Khrushchev was gone, because he would not have a problem telling him that. So by the time they were done, Khrushchev was called back to work. Tibbs told the others what Stowe and Genny had told them. Do you believe them? Don asked. They don't lie, he replied. If they don't want me to know something, they say that. But they're a dungeon. Shouldn't they try to trick you? Maybe they aren't there to kill us, but just telling you things, just telling you things as they are sounds like it's too easy. The dungeon likes Tibbs too much, Jekyll said, while Tibbs considered what Don said. There was never light on any of Stowe or Genny's word, but was that because they didn't lie? Or because as a dungeon with all the elements, they could keep them from glowing? In the end, because there was no way he could think of finding out, he decided that as his friend, Stowe and Genny wouldn't lie to him. We have all benefited from the dungeon's affection for Tibs, Comdar said. After something from Mez about Jackal from the fighter's smirk that Tibs missed, that it be our intent or not. What do you think it is? Tibbs asked after forming a bubble around them to keep their words from reaching others. A city, Don replied confidently. Inside a mountain? Tibbs asked in disbelief. Why not? Tibbs stared at the sword, trying to come up with a way to explain just how impossible it seemed to him. The dungeon said that there were no ways in or out, Mez said, until he made the stairwell. But it was there before they did anything, Don countered. They don't know how long it's been there. Passageways could have collapsed and been sealed over time until it was impossible to tell them apart from the rest of the stone. That can happen? Tibbs asked in surprise. Trust Dawn to come up with an answer with some... Come up with an answer... He come up with an answer he couldn't understand any more than the previous the previous problem. Don tapped a knuckle on the table. While this is solid and fixed to you and me, the essence it's made of isn't. We all know essence can be made to flow, but it also does it without help, like water, Tibbs said, and air, fire, Don replied, and every other element. Jekyll pressed a hand on the wooden table. This doesn't feel like it's flowing, because it's not because it isn't. Happening at a speed we can understand. You more than anyone else should understand that Earth is slow, but it can still crack mountains and continents. Tibbs almost asked what that last word was, but decided he wanted to resolve this. He wanted this resolved before he tackled something he was sure would result in a bigger headache. But there was no one in the world before the dungeons, was there? Mez asked. Aren't they how everyone was created? That's highly debated, Don said. There are books that claim that and bring forth evidence to support the claim, while others claim that we, as in people, made the first dungeon and that it then went wild and caused the others to happen, and they provide evidence to support that theory. Purity clerics, Condor said, is done almost forcefully dispassionate, will tell that purity created everything, that it made us so we would stand between it and the other elements, which exist only to corrupt and destroy its creation. Clerics claim a lot of things, Don replies dismissively, and don't offer evidence to support their claims. There's a reason there are no cleric academies. I expect that even if they allowed other academies access to all the books they claim to have written, proving all they say, not one of them would be accepted as being anything more than unsubstantiated imagination. Tibbs caught the twitch from Kumdar at the mention of Cleric Academy, but the cleric immediately made his face impartial again. Hasn't someone with Void written anything? Mez asked. Karina said at one point how their element let them know things out of orders. They fell silent, and Tibbs listened to his breathing. There was regret she wasn't with them, and some pain that he was the reason Sebastian had targeted her, but it was manageable. There have been experiments, Don said once Tibbs drank. I read mention of them, but no, not the details of the result. When we're allowed to travel again, I'll see about locating books mentioned. That's going to be a while. Jekyll said with a chuckle. We need to clear the 4th floor first. Don nodded. One thing I have read about regarding Void and your question, Mez, is that one problem the users encounter is that they don't gain a frame of reference for what time they know. The note didn't mention any times when the reference came with the knowledge. I don't see how that means anything, the archer said. All right. Keep in mind this is a supposition on my part built from what I read. Imagine that a void sorcerer uses their essence to see another time, and they see buildings around them, a road and people working it. How do they tell what time they are seeing? Or that they aren't now but far away? Or maybe they are in a later time? But its essence, Tibbs said. It can be woven and etched to do what they want, but they need to know what it is they want and come up with a way to make it happen. Maybe there are books documenting what happened, what that documenting that happening. I'll have to look for those too. But the mention I have come across in my reading indicates that void isn't as simple to control through weaving and etching as the other elements. Maybe it's because those who have void go strange, Miss offered. Possibly, or it's the attempt that have made them so. Nothing I read spec to that. What about that thing about the dungeon saying there are rooms it doesn't understand? Jekyll asked. Dunn shrugged. I have no idea. What I read is based on dungeon being, at best, animals. Nothing I've come across suggests they are capable of more than animalistic cunning. Even things like rooms and camps are explained as something it could sense around it. Although exactly how dungeons can do that, none of them seem to agree on. That's how far they can influence, Tib said. Yes, you and I know that because they told you, but they aren't changing more than the stairs. If they are simply an animal, why stop there? Unless that is the limit of what they are capable of doing. The scholars studying them are missing information that is vital to their understanding and filling that with theories and supposition they try to support through evidence. Well, you have the information, Jekyll said. How do you explain it? Dunn laughed. I don't. I thought that the tunnels and halls were part of the dungeon's body, so they should. He tapped a finger on the table as the silence stretched, then nodded. Actually, that might still be true. It's not like I know everything that goes on inside my body. Tibbs knows, Tickle said. No, I don't. Your essence lets you see in our bodies. In our lets you see in our bodies. The fighter insisted. That isn't what it does, Tibbs replied, annoyed. I sense it inside you. It reacts to what happens to you, and that way I know if you're injured. But it doesn't let me know what happens to the food we eat or why it comes out looking the way it does on the other end. He raised a hand to stop Don. I don't want to know. The sorcerer chuckled. No, I suppose you don't. Any idea on how we'll find the boss room? Jekyll asked. Going house to house, house to house, Mez replied unhappily. The dungeon said there were going to be clues, so until Don or Tibbs figured those out, we don't have a choice. He looked at the others. Do we? Will each house be like a dungeon room? Jekyll asked. Is he going to showing with something to fight and loot as reward? It's doubtful that every room will be made like that, Don said. Everything a dungeon makes is an expenditure of the essence it has accumulated. That is still true here. Now, now, the dungeon didn't have to make this floor, but anything they change is something they have to make. What I saw of the cityscape makes it vast. So too vast for a dungeon to have enough essence to redo entirely. Yes, I am making a supposition with less than ideal information, since I don't know exactly how much changes cost the dungeon, but going by the first three floors, I think my supposition is sound. They've said the floor comes with its own way of generating essence somehow, so that means we can expect more rooms than what would be normal for a fourth floor, but that can't be enough for the whole city, especially since they need to keep some for the next floor, and they are going to have to put a lot of essence into making something that comes close to surpassing this one. On average, floor above floor double in size and difficulty each new one each time. The third floor is a lot larger than that compared to the second one, Mez said. Only an actual area. If you look at the challenges it poses, I'd say it's closer to one time and a half as difficult. There are 4 actual rooms, 3 puzzles, and the boss room. Then there are what, a dozen fights throughout the halls? That's more than twice the number of fights on the second floor, Jekyll said. But how do they compare? Don asked. We had hordes of creatures to defeat there. Here, there are teams of 5 people golem, 1 or 2 with added gnolls. I average it to 12 fight per runs. That isn't. You're wrong, Jekyll said, stunning the sorcerer silent. Even Tibs, there's not a fighter. That was quite a statement for him to make, all things considered. Yes, the group we've had to fight are usually smaller, but they all come with essence user and the use of team tactics. Numbers don't represent how easy or hard a fight is going to be. Cross is one person without an element, and she'll kick your ass if you try to take her on. I'm not fighting her, Tibs protested when Jackal looked at him. I am nowhere near that stupid, Maz said under the look. I have no interest in attempting to demonstrate superiority over her, Kamdar said. Don was silent when Jekyll looked at him, thoughtful. You make a valid point, Don finally said, with reluctance. With reluctance. The books I read must have only focused on using the geography of a dungeon floor to calculate its rating. He smiled. But if you thought of it, better people than you must have done so before. And I simply haven't come across those books. Jekyll grinned. Thank you. Don looked at the others. Didn't I just insult him? There are times when our dear team leader takes incalculable delight in being insulted. True, Jekyll said, but this isn't one of them. Kamdar shrugged. If that is the case, I am as perplexed as Don. What are you thanking me for, then? Don asked cautiously. You said smarter people than I will have thought about that. Don nodded. Don's nod was hesitating. But you didn't think about it, Jekyll grinned. And I never read one book in my life. Tibs snorted in his ale and glared at the fighter. Don stared, mouth agape. Miss patted the sorcerer's shoulder. Don't let it get to you. It helps to remember Jackal isn't the idiot it wants you to think he is. I should be offended at that, Jekyll said, raising his tankard to his lip, but I feel too abyss good right now to let that insult bother me. And that concludes chapter 69 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to to read this book and the other one in the series, they are up on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of Royal Road and support me at the same time, that is on my Patreon, where we are about 20 chapters ahead. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.